Before we begin, has a single medical decision ever completely destroyed your life? This true story of an American veteran will show you that even the most devastating addiction can become the most powerful testimony. Warning: what you're about to watch will transform your perspective on the opioid crisis and the redemptive power of Christ. Subscribe now and hit the bell for more life-changing testimonies. 10 years destroyed by one pill. What happened next will make you cry. Jonathan Rivera adjusted his military uniform one last time as he watched the desert of Kandahar disappear through the window of the C-130. After 2 years serving his country in Afghanistan as an Army communications specialist, he was finally heading home to Phoenix, Arizona. His fellow soldiers had nicknamed him the Tech for his exceptional ability to repair any radio equipment under enemy fire. At 25 years old, Jonathan was the perfect definition of an American soldier, disciplined, brave, and completely dedicated to protecting the freedoms he cherished. His wife, Elena, and their 3-year-old son, Mateo, were waiting for him at Luke Air Force Base with balloons and welcome signs. The Rivera family had been waiting for this moment for 24 endless months. "Daddy's home, champ," Jonathan whispered as he embraced Mateo at the airport. Tears flowed freely down Elena's cheeks, who had raised their son alone while praying every night for her husband's safe return. The photograph of that family reunion would end up framed in their 2-bedroom home in Tempe. During his military service, Jonathan had demonstrated extraordinary courage. In a particularly dangerous mission near the Pakistan border, he had risked his life to rescue 3 wounded comrades from a building collapsing after a mortar attack. The impact of the debris had caused a severe back injury that military doctors treated with basic painkillers and limited physical therapy. "It's just muscle pain, Soldier Rivera," the military doctor had told him. "With rest and some exercises, you'll be good as new at home." But the pain persisted day and night. Jonathan hid it because he didn't want to worry Elena or appear weak after being a war hero. He had survived brutal combat, IED explosions, and the constant tension of a war zone. A simple backache wasn't going to defeat him. His plan was simple: reintegrate into civilian life, use his technical skills to get a good job at a Phoenix tech company, buy a bigger house for his growing family, and live the American dream he had defended with his own blood on foreign soil. Jonathan had no idea that a routine visit to the family doctor in 3 weeks would change the course of his life forever, beginning a downward spiral that would cause him to lose absolutely everything he loved most in this world. 3 weeks after his return, the pain in Jonathan's back had intensified to become something unbearable. Elena would find him awake at 3 a.m., pacing the living room and clenching his teeth to keep from screaming in pain. The exercises recommended by the military doctor weren't working, and ibuprofen was like giving aspirin to a man with a broken bone. "Honey, you have to see a doctor," Elena insisted as she watched him struggle to get out of bed. "You can't go on like this. Mateo needs you healthy and strong." Dr. Michael Thompson, a respected family physician in Scottsdale with 20 years of experience, received Jonathan in his modern, well-equipped office. After reviewing the military records and performing a complete physical examination, the diagnosis was clear: chronic injury to the lumbar vertebrae L4 and L5 caused by war trauma. "Mr. Rivera, you served our country valiantly and deserve to live without pain," Dr. Thompson told him with an understanding tone. "I have exactly what you need to regain your quality of life." The doctor opened a drawer and pulled out a small white bottle with a label that read OxyContin 20 milligrams. This is one of the most effective and safest painkillers on the market. Purdue Pharma, the pharmaceutical company that produces it, has shown that the risk of addiction is less than 1%. It's practically impossible to become dependent if taken as directed. Jonathan examined the bottle curiously. The pills were small, round, and light green. They looked completely harmless, like vitamins. "Are you sure it's safe, doctor? I've heard stories about strong painkillers." completely safe, Mr. Rivera. In fact, it would be medical negligence on my part not to treat you properly. Untreated chronic pain can cause depression, marital problems, and deterioration of quality of life. These pills will give you your life back. Dr. Thompson handed him the prescription with a reassuring smile. Take one every 12 hours with food. You'll feel relief within 30 minutes. Many of our veterans have returned to completely normal lives thanks to this medication. That afternoon, Jonathan took his first OxyContin pill with a glass of water while Eleanor prepared lunch. Within 45 minutes, something miraculous happened. For the first time in months, the excruciating pain disappeared completely. But more than that, he felt a wave of euphoria and well-being he had never experienced before. "Elena, I feel incredible," he told his wife, hugging her tightly. "It's like I'm myself again." What Jonathan didn't know was that OxyContin was essentially heroin in pill form, designed to be highly addictive. Purdue Pharma had lied to millions of doctors and patients about its safety. That single harmless pill would begin a chemical dependency that would consume the next decade of his life. 6 months after that first pill, Jonathan's life had become a carefully orchestrated lie. What started as 1 pill every 12 hours had gradually increased to 4 pills a day, then 6, then 8. His body had developed a tolerance to OxyContin, requiring higher doses to achieve the same pain relief and euphoric feeling that had initially amazed him. "Dr. Thompson, the pain is getting worse," Jonathan lied during his monthly appointment. "The current dose isn't working anymore. Sometimes I wake up in agony at night." The truth was more sinister. Jonathan was no longer taking OxyContin for pain. He was taking it to avoid the horrific withdrawal symptoms that began just hours after his last dose. Cold sweats, nausea, muscle cramps, and an indescribable anxiety that felt like his skin was crawling with insects. Dr. Thompson, convinced by Jonathan's military service record and apparent credibility, increased the prescription to 40 mg pills, twice a day. "Let's try a stronger dose, Mr. Rivera. Your service-related injury clearly requires more aggressive treatment." At home, Elena was beginning to notice disturbing changes. Jonathan slept constantly during the day but was restless at night. His personality had shifted from the loving, energetic husband she married to someone moody and distant. Their intimate life had disappeared entirely, a common side effect of opioid addiction that Jonathan attributed to stress from adjusting to civilian life. "Honey, you've been acting strange lately," Elena confronted him one evening while Mateo played with toy soldiers on the living room floor. "You're either sleeping or irritated. When was the last time we really talked?" "I'm fine, Elena. I'm still adjusting to being home. The medication helps with the pain and the doctor says it's perfectly safe," Jonathan replied defensively, unconsciously touching the pill bottle in his pocket like a security blanket. But Jonathan was far from fine. He had begun timing his entire life around his next dose. He would panic if he realized he had forgotten to bring pills to work, often making excuses to drive home during lunch breaks. His job performance at Tech Solutions, a Phoenix-based IT company, had started to decline as he struggled to concentrate through the fog of constant medication. The pills that once made him feel superhuman now simply made him feel normal. Without them, he felt like he was dying. But Jonathan convinced himself this was still medical treatment, not addiction. After all, a respected doctor had prescribed them, and they came from a legitimate pharmacy with official labels. What Jonathan didn't know was that he had become one of millions of Americans trapped in what would later be called the worst man-made public health crisis in modern history. Purdue Pharma's aggressive marketing campaign had convinced doctors across the country that OxyContin was a miracle drug, while secretly the company knew it was creating addicts by the thousands. The small white pills had become Jonathan's master, and he didn't even realize he was already enslaved. By his second year on OxyContin, Jonathan had crossed a line he never thought possible. The 40 mg pills were no longer enough. But doctor, Thompson had grown suspicious of his frequent requests for dose increases. During his last appointment, the doctor had mentioned pill-seeking behavior, a phrase that terrified Jonathan more than any enemy fire in Afghanistan. "Mr. Rivera, I'm concerned about your tolerance levels. Perhaps we should consider alternative pain management approaches," Dr. Thompson had suggested, unknowingly threatening to cut off Jonathan's lifeline. Desperate and facing the prospect of withdrawal, Jonathan made his first illegal move. He had discovered online forums where people shared information about obtaining pills without prescriptions. Through a co-worker's cousin, he met a street dealer named Carlos, who operated out of a barbershop in South Phoenix. "Military boy, huh?" Carlos said, examining Jonathan's clean-cut appearance with amusement. "Your prescription run out?" "Yeah, that happens. These doctors get scared and cut you off when you really need the medicine." Carlos offered OxyContin 80 milligrams pills for $50 each, nearly 10 times more potent than Jonathan's original prescription. The price was devastating to the family budget, but Jonathan was beyond rational thinking. He spent $300 that first day, money Elena had saved for Mateo's preschool registration. "Where did the money go, Jonathan?" Elena asked that evening, looking at their nearly empty checking account on her phone. "We had $800 yesterday for Mateo's school." "I had to. There was an emergency car repair," Jonathan stammered, hating himself for lying to the woman he loved. The transmission needed work. Elena looked at their car parked outside, running perfectly fine, then back at her husband's nervous face. For the first time in their 6-year marriage, she realized Jonathan was lying to her. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. The street pills were different from the pharmacy ones. They were often counterfeit, mixed with dangerous substances, or inconsistent in strength. Sometimes Jonathan would take one and feel nothing, forcing him to take 2 or 3 more. Other times, a single pill would be so strong it would knock him unconscious for hours. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours without explanation, claiming he was running errands. He started stealing small amounts of cash from Elena's purse, always amounts small enough that she might think she had miscounted. He pawned his military medals, his watch, and his laptop, items that represented everything he had once been proud of. The worst part was the morning Mateo found his father unconscious on the bathroom floor, blue around the lips and barely breathing. Eleanor's screams as she called 911 would haunt Jonathan's memory forever. The paramedics revived him with 2 doses of Narcan, but the damage to his family's trust was irreversible. "Daddy sick?" 4-year-old Mateo had asked his mother after the ambulance left. "Yes, baby," Elena whispered through her tears. "Daddy is very, very sick." The overdose incident became the breaking point Elena had been dreading for months. The next morning, while Jonathan was still groggy from the emergency room visit, she sat him down at their kitchen table with divorce papers already printed from her laptop. "Jonathan, I can't do this anymore," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I found your pills hidden in the garage. I know about the money you've been stealing. And yesterday, our son almost watched his father die on the bathroom floor." Jonathan's hands trembled as he stared at the legal documents. "Elena, please. I can get clean. I can stop. It's just the pain from my back injury. I need the medication." "Stop lying to me." Elena's composure finally cracked. "There is no back pain anymore. You're addicted to drugs, Jonathan. You're an addict, and I won't let you destroy our son's life too." The word addict hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He had been a decorated war veteran, a hero who had risked his life for his country. How could he be reduced to such a shameful label? But as he looked around their home, at the missing television he had sold, the empty spaces where family heirlooms used to sit, the fear in Mateo's eyes when he looked at his father, Jonathan realized Elena was telling the truth. "I'm taking Mateo to my sister's house in Denver," Elena continued. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You have supervised visitation rights once you complete a rehabilitation program. But Jonathan, if you ever come near us while you're using drugs, I'll call the police." Within a week, Jonathan's family was gone. The house felt like a tomb, filled with the echoes of the life he had destroyed. He tried to maintain his job at Tech Solutions, but showing up high and making critical errors with client data quickly led to his termination. Rivera, we've been patient because of your military service, but we can't have someone unreliable handling sensitive information, his supervisor explained during the firing. Get help, man. You're throwing away a good career. Alone and unemployed, Jonathan's addiction accelerated exponentially. Without the pretense of maintaining a normal life, he began using drugs throughout the day. The $50 pills became too expensive, so Carlos introduced him to heroin, a cheaper alternative that provided the same relief from withdrawal symptoms. It's the same thing as your pills, just more pure, Carlos explained, showing Jonathan how to smoke the brown powder off aluminum foil. This way you get more for your money. The first time Jonathan used heroin, he told himself it was temporary, just until he could afford real pills again. But heroin was not only cheaper, it was more potent. The euphoria was deeper, the pain relief more complete, and the addiction more vicious than anything OxyContin had prepared him for. Within months, Jonathan had lost his house to foreclosure. He moved into a weekly motel room, then to his car, then finally to the streets. The clean-cut veteran who had once been trusted with classified military communications was now a homeless drug addict, panhandling for change outside gas stations. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort of sleeping under bridges or the constant search for his next fix. The worst part was the complete loss of his identity. Every morning, Jonathan woke up hating the person he had become. 3 years into his life on the streets, Jonathan Rivera bore no resemblance to the war hero who had once served his country with honor. His weight had dropped from 180 pounds to barely 120. His teeth were rotting from drug use and poor nutrition. Track marks covered his arms, where he had progressed from smoking heroin to injecting it for a stronger effect. Downtown Phoenix had become his entire world, a 5-block radius around the homeless shelter where he occasionally slept and the areas where dealers operated. He knew every doorway suitable for sleeping, every dumpster that might contain discarded food, and every person who might spare $1 for food that would actually buy drugs. "Hey, soldier boy," called out Maria, a fellow addict who had become his survival partner on the streets. "Carlos is looking for you. Says you owe him money." Jonathan's stomach lurched with fear. He owed Carlos $300 for heroin he had consumed but couldn't pay for. In the street economy, debts like this were often settled with violence. Carlos had already beaten Jonathan twice for late payments, leaving him with cracked ribs and a black eye that took weeks to heal. "I told him I'd have it by tomorrow," Jonathan replied, knowing it was impossible. He had already sold everything he owned, begged from every family member who would still take his calls, and committed petty crimes that filled him with shame. He had shoplifted from grocery stores, stolen copper pipes from abandoned buildings, and even taken money from the donation jar at a church food bank. That evening, while searching for shelter from a rare Phoenix rainstorm, Jonathan broke into what he thought was an abandoned warehouse. Instead, he found himself in the back of a small church called New Life Community in a rough neighborhood. The door had been left unlocked, and warm light glowed from the sanctuary where a small prayer meeting was taking place. Jonathan crouched behind some boxes, shivering from withdrawal symptoms and trying not to be discovered. But as he listened to the voices praying, something stirred inside him that he hadn't felt in years. These people were praying for the homeless, for addicts, for veterans struggling with PTSD. They were praying for people like him. "Lord, we lift up those who are suffering on our streets tonight." An elderly woman's voice carried through the building. "We know that no one is too far gone for your love to reach them." Loudly, tears began streaming down Jonathan's dirty face as he remembered the last time he had prayed. It was in a foxhole in Afghanistan, asking God to protect his squad during an enemy ambush. God had answered that prayer. They had all survived. But Jonathan had forgotten God existed during his descent into addiction. When the prayer meeting ended and the church members left, Jonathan remained hidden in the darkness. This was his lowest point, a homeless, desperate addict hiding in a church, afraid to face God or man. He had lost his family, his career, his health, his dignity, and his hope. God, he whispered into the darkness, if you're still there, I don't know how to pray anymore. I don't even know if you can hear me. I'm so far from who I used to be. That night, sleeping on the cold church floor, Jonathan had no idea that his desperate whisper was about to be answered in a way that would change everything. Jonathan woke up on the cold church floor to the sound of someone gently shaking his shoulder. His first instinct was panic. Had the police found him? Was Carlos here to collect his debt? But when he opened his eyes, he saw the face of an elderly African-American man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Son, you don't need to be afraid, the man said softly. I'm Pastor Williams. This is my church and you're welcome here. Jonathan scrambled to his feet, mumbling apologies. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break in. I was just trying to get out of the rain. I'll leave right now. You didn't break in, son. Our doors are never locked because Jesus said his house should be a house of prayer for all people. That includes you. Pastor Williams studied Jonathan's gaunt face and track-marked arms with compassion, not judgment. When's the last time you had a real meal? Something about the pastor's genuine kindness broke through the walls Jonathan had built around his heart. For the first time in years, he told the truth to a stranger. I don't remember. I'm not really hungry anymore. I just need... He trailed off, unable to admit his desperate need for drugs. Come with me, Pastor Williams said, leading Jonathan to a small kitchen behind the sanctuary. My wife left some soup last night. While you eat, maybe you can tell me your story. As Jonathan consumed the first real food he had tasted in days, the words began pouring out. He told Pastor Williams about Afghanistan, about the injury, about the first prescription, about losing Elena and Mateo. He talked for 3 hours straight, releasing years of shame and pain he had carried alone. Son, Pastor Williams said when Jonathan finished, I want you to know something important. God didn't bring you to this church by accident. He's been calling your name, even when you couldn't hear him through the noise of your addiction. That night, Pastor Williams offered Jonathan something no one had offered him in years. Unconditional refuge. You can stay here as long as you need to. The only requirement is that you let us help you get clean. But Jonathan, I need you to understand something. Getting clean isn't something you can do in your own strength. You need a power greater than yourself. Over the next week, Jonathan experienced withdrawal symptoms more severe than anything he had endured before. But this time, he wasn't alone. Pastor Williams and church members took shifts staying with him, praying over him and caring for him as he sweated, shook, and cried through detox. On the 7th night, when Jonathan thought he might die from the physical and emotional agony, something supernatural happened. As he lay on a cot in the church, Pastor Williams reading Psalms aloud, Jonathan suddenly felt a presence fill the room. Jonathan, my son, a voice spoke, not audibly, but directly into his heart. I have been with you every step of this journey, even in the darkest places. Warmth flooded through Jonathan's body, not from drugs, but from something infinitely more powerful. He felt arms that weren't physical embracing him, and for the first time since his first pill, he felt completely safe and loved. Lord, Jonathan whispered, I destroyed everything. How can you still love me? Because you are my child, the voice replied. I knew this day would come before you took your first breath. The encounter with God's presence that night marked the beginning of a supernatural transformation that would continue for weeks. Unlike the temporary relief drugs had provided, this divine intervention began healing Jonathan from the inside out. Not just his addiction, but the deep wounds that had made him vulnerable to it in the first place. Each morning for the next month, Jonathan would wake up in the church and spend hours in prayer, experiencing visions and divine conversations that gradually revealed God's purpose for his suffering. Through these encounters, he began to understand that his addiction hadn't been a punishment, but preparation for something greater. Jonathan, Jesus spoke to him during one profound morning prayer session. Do you remember the scripture about Joseph? What you meant for evil, God meant for good, to save many lives. But Lord, I hurt so many people. Elena, Mateo, my family. How can any good come from that? Look at your hands, son, Jesus replied. Jonathan looked down at his hands, still bearing faint needle marks. As he watched, he saw a vision of these same hands, clean and strong, reaching out to pull other veterans from the pit of addiction. He saw himself speaking to thousands of people, sharing his testimony. He saw treatment centers with his name on them, helping families like his own find healing. Your scars will become your credentials, Jesus continued. Who better to guide someone out of a pit than someone who has been to the bottom and found the way out? Your addiction will give you authority to speak hope into the hopeless. Week by week, the divine love Jonathan experienced grew stronger. He felt God's arms around him when he slept, heard God's voice of encouragement throughout the day, and experienced waves of unconditional love that healed decades of shame and self-hatred. Pastor Williams watched in amazement as Jonathan's physical appearance began changing too. His weight returned to normal, his skin regained color, and his eyes, which had been hollow and dead, began to sparkle with new life. Son, in 40 years of ministry, I've never seen such a dramatic transformation, Pastor Williams told him. God has special plans for you. But the most powerful moment came during Jonathan's 6th week at the church. As he prayed in the sanctuary, he felt compelled to pick up the phone and call Elena. He hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years. Elena, it's Jonathan, he said when she answered, surprised she hadn't hung up immediately. Jonathan, her voice was cautious, guarded. Are you okay? Elena, I'm clean. I'm really clean this time. And I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know something. I met Jesus, Elena. Really met him. And he's healing me. There was silence on the other end. Then quietly, Elena began to cry. I've been praying for 3 years that God would save you, she whispered. Mateo asks about his daddy every single day. He's 7 now, Jonathan. He barely remembers you. I know I lost the right to be called his father, Jonathan replied, his own tears flowing. But if God gives me the chance, I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to both of you. There's something I need to tell you, Eleanor said softly. I never stopped believing God could save you. I never stopped loving you either. For the first time in 4 years, Jonathan felt hope, real hope, that his family might one day be restored. 6 months after his divine encounter, Jonathan had become a living testimony of transformation. Pastor Williams had connected him with a Christian rehabilitation program specifically designed for veterans, where Jonathan not only completed his recovery, but also began training as a peer counselor. Mr. Rivera, said Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the program director, in 20 years of addiction medicine, I've rarely seen someone with your level of commitment to helping others. Your story needs to be heard. Jonathan had been clean for 8 months when Eleanor agreed to meet him in person for the first time since their divorce. She flew from Denver to Phoenix with Mateo, now 7 years old, for a carefully supervised visit at the rehabilitation center. When Jonathan saw his son walking through the door, his heart nearly stopped. Mateo had grown tall and looked so much like Jonathan at that age. But the boy hung back behind his mother, uncertain and afraid of this stranger who claimed to be his father. Hi, Mateo, Jonathan said, kneeling down to the boy's level. I know I look different than you remember. I've been very sick, but Jesus made me better. Are you really my daddy? Mateo asked in a small voice. Yes, son. I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry I was sick for so long. But I promise you, I'm never going to leave you again. Elena watched with tears in her eyes as Jonathan spent 3 hours with Mateo, playing with action figures, reading books, and simply listening to his son talk about school, friends, and the life he had built without his father. Elena, Jonathan said when Mateo was distracted with toys, I know I destroyed our family. I know I have no right to ask for another chance. But I want you to know That every day I'm clean is a day I'm choosing you and Mateo over drugs. Jonathan, I can see the change in you, Elena replied softly. You look like the man I married again, but it's going to take time. Mateo barely knows you, and I need to see that this recovery is real. Over the next year, Jonathan proved his commitment through consistency. He never missed a scheduled call with Mateo. He completed his rehabilitation program with honors. He got a job at a non-profit organization helping homeless veterans. Most importantly, he began speaking at churches, schools, and treatment centers about his journey from addiction to redemption. His first major speaking engagement was at a conference for military families affected by PTSD and addiction. Standing before 500 people, Jonathan shared his story with raw honesty. I want to tell you about a pill that destroyed 10 years of my life, he began. But more importantly, I want to tell you about a God who can restore what addiction steals. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of veterans and family members approached him afterward, seeking help for their own struggles. Within months, Jonathan was speaking across the country, becoming a nationally recognized voice in veteran addiction recovery. Eleanor watched his transformation from afar, seeing news articles about his ministry work and videos of his speaking engagements. Slowly, her heart began to open to the possibility that the Jonathan she had fallen in love with was truly back. The turning point came when Jonathan was featured on a national news program about the opioid crisis. As Elena watched him speak with authority and compassion about addiction and recovery, she realized that his suffering had been transformed into something beautiful, a mission to save other families from the destruction hers had endured. Mateo, she said to her son as they watched the interview together, your daddy is helping a lot of people get better, just like Jesus helped him get better. Does that mean daddy can come home now? Mateo asked with 8-year-old hope. Maybe, baby, Elena whispered. Maybe it does. 2 years after Jonathan's divine encounter in that small Phoenix church, he stood in a completely different place than he could have ever imagined. The man who had once been a homeless addict was now the director of Second Chance Veterans, a non-profit organization he had founded to help military personnel overcome addiction and rebuild their lives. The organization had helped over 300 veterans get clean and reconnect with their families. Jonathan's story had been featured in Time magazine, and he had testified before Congress about the need for better addiction treatment for military personnel. But the greatest victory wasn't professional, it was personal. Elena Rivera, will you marry me again? Jonathan asked, getting down on one knee in the same park where they had been married 10 years earlier. This time, 9-year-old Mateo was beside him, holding the ring box and grinning widely. Daddy asked me if it was okay, Mateo explained to his mother. I said yes, because I want us to be a family again. Eleanor looked at the man kneeling before her, the same man she had fallen in love with as a young woman, but deeper, wiser, and marked by the scars of redemption. Yes, Jonathan, yes, we can start over. Their second wedding was held at New Life Community Church, with Pastor Williams officiating. Instead of the elaborate ceremony they'd had as young adults, this was a simple celebration of restoration, attended by fellow veterans in recovery, church members who had prayed Jonathan through his darkest days, and family members who had witnessed the miracle of his transformation. Jonathan and Elena, Pastor Williams said during the ceremony, your story proves that no matter how broken something becomes, God specializes in making all things new. In his wedding vows, Jonathan spoke not just to Elena, but to everyone present. 10 years ago, one pill began the destruction of everything I loved. But today, I stand here as proof that Jesus Christ can rebuild what addiction destroys. Elena, I promise you that every day I choose recovery is a day I choose to love you and Mateo more than I love anything else in this world. After the ceremony, as the small congregation celebrated, Jonathan stepped outside for a moment of reflection. He looked up at the Arizona sky and remembered the desperate prayer he had whispered in this same church 3 years earlier. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. I never gave up on you, son." He heard that familiar voice in his heart. "I was with you in the pit, and I'm with you on the mountaintop. Now go and help others find their way out of the darkness." Today, Jonathan Rivera speaks to thousands of people each year about the power of redemption. His book, One Pill, A Veteran's Journey from Addiction to Purpose, has become a bestseller. But more importantly, he goes to bed every night as a husband to Elena and a father to Mateo, roles he thought he had lost forever. The pills that once enslaved him are now part of a testimony that sets others free. What the enemy meant for destruction, God truly turned into victory, not just for Jonathan, but for the hundreds of families who have found hope through his story. His scars became his credentials, just as Jesus had promised in that dark church 3 years ago. Today, as I write these words, Jonathan Rivera is 40 years old and has been clean for over 5 years. His organization's Second Chance Veterans has expanded to 12 states and has helped over 2,000 veterans overcome addiction. Elena works alongside him as the family program coordinator, and Mateo, now 12, often speaks at youth events about forgiveness and second chances. But here's what makes this story even more powerful. Jonathan was just an ordinary person like you and me. He wasn't a pastor or a spiritual leader. He was simply a man who trusted his doctor, took a pill for legitimate pain, and fell into the trap that has claimed millions of American lives. The difference wasn't in his willpower or his strength. The difference was his encounter with Jesus Christ in that small church, when he had absolutely nothing left to lose. The same Jesus who found Jonathan hiding behind those boxes is looking for you right now, wherever you are. Maybe you're struggling with addiction yourself, perhaps a prescription turned into something you never intended. Maybe you're using substances to numb pain you don't know how to heal. Or possibly you're watching someone you love disappear into the darkness of dependency, feeling helpless and hopeless. I want you to know something. No one is too far gone for God's love to reach them. No addiction is too strong for his power to break. No life is too broken for him to restore. Jonathan's story proves that rock bottom can become the solid foundation for an incredible comeback. His worst day became the setup for his greatest victory. The pills that nearly killed him became part of a testimony that has saved thousands of lives. If you're in the pit right now, know this: God hasn't forgotten about you. He's not angry with you. He's not waiting for you to get your life together before he helps you. He's reaching into your darkness right now, just like he reached into Jonathan's. Don't leave without doing this. If this story touched your heart, subscribe right now and hit that bell so you never miss another testimony that could change your life forever. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe someone needs to hear that their addiction doesn't have to be the end of their story. Comment your answer to this question. What's one thing you're struggling with that you need to surrender to Jesus today? Share this video with someone who needs hope. It might be exactly what they need to hear in their darkest moment. And if you want to pray with me right now to give your heart to Jesus Christ, type in the comments, "Jesus, take control of my life, and I will personally pray for you." Remember, your pain is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your purpose. See you in the next life-changing testimony.